Hello and welcome everyone to this edition of Fish Stripes Live. Today we have a jam-packed episode. We have 9 topics to go through in about an hour. We have a lot of things to talk about since last episode. We are joined here today, smaller group, the usual suspects, Isaac, Eli, Kevin, Alex. Noah couldn't join us. Alex Kircher couldn't join us. So we're going to keep it small here today. Before we go and talk about the Marlins and everything that happened there, since we're going to have 95% on that, I wanted to talk about this 5% about what happened yesterday, a little bit, and talk about the Hall of Fame for a bit, for at least a small bit. Scott Rolen, the only player elected to the Hall of Fame, along with Fred McGriff in the Veterans Committee. Scott Rolen got about 76% of the vote. Former Cardinal, Philly, Blue Jay, Red. Shout out Grant, going into the Hall of Fame, one of the best Gold Glove defensive third basemen in history. Alex, I want to start off with you. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts of Scott Rolen getting into the Hall of Fame and it being only a one-player class in the modern era.
So I'll start off with a personal story, Danny, and thank you guys again for having me on. I appreciate it as always. But I'll start off with a personal story. When I was in Little League, and when I first started playing baseball, it turns out I wasn't very good, but I was good in Little League. I was on the Cincinnati Reds, and I was a third baseman. So one of the people that I always looked up to when I was playing as a young kid, he was on the Reds at the time, was Scott Rolen, because he was one of the best defensive players in baseball and could hack it as well at the plate. So I think this is very well-deserved for a really good player. I mean, this guy definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Like so special in the field. That's like his main thing was that he was so good in the field. And then at the plate, I think he was like a career 280 hitter. So that'll get it done. And when you do that and you come out to be, what was he, a 70 career WAR player, that's Hall of Fame. So he definitely deserves it. I'm glad that he's there. I thought there should have been more players that were elected in this class, but he winds up being the only one along with McGriff from the Contemporary Committee. So yeah, good for him. Proud of him, and it's cool to see one of my childhood heroes get in there. Really cool.
Yeah, for whatever reason, third base has been a very underrepresented position in the Hall of Fame.
Alex Kirchhoff.
As we're joined by Alex Krutchik as well on this panel. And for Rolen, like there's just, for whatever reason, there's a very short list, and that's changing now pretty rapidly because Adrian Beltre, looking ahead to next year, he's going to be on the ballot for the first time, and he's widely expected to get in just because his counting stats are really overwhelming. And Rolen, what makes him so unusual is how little support he received the first year on the ballot. It was only like barely 10% that very first year. he was closer to falling off the ballot than he was to like actually getting into the Hall of Fame. And I think eventually, credit to the voters on this one as really revisiting the past for a guy that was underappreciated in his time as well. You could just see his accolades. Aside from the Gold Gloves, he was a player that just was not really acknowledged as being super elite during his career. And when you rewind, he probably was. He was a guy that kind of flew under the radar because he did things that perhaps we weren't valuing as much 15 years ago as we are right now in terms of what they do to win and lose games. Just a really well-rounded player. And as Carver said, it's trending towards a bigger class in 2024.
Yeah. Before the announcement came, I was tracking that it might have been a 2-player class with Scott Rowland and with Todd Helton. I know we all had a prediction stream for the Hall of Fame. I think most of us had 2, 3. I myself had 4. I had Rowland, Helton, Sheffield, and Wagner. Only Rowland getting in. What do you guys think about it being a 1-person class? Kev, the youngest one here, you probably only seen some of these players in the tail end of their career. Yeah. But tell us your thoughts on being a 1-player class and maybe what you hope for.
I mean, I guess we could say we hope for more players to get in, and more. How can I say this? Maybe we would have liked to see Rowland and Helton get in, or maybe a 3-player class would have been nice to see. Obviously, I mean, these writers seem pretty harsh when it comes to the voting and their process when it comes to it. So hopefully, I mean, most likely next year we'll be seeing maybe a 3-player class. You could basically lock in Helton next season, Beltre if he gets in first ballot, and then I know Eli won't like this, but Wagner could probably get in next year.
We'll get to him.
He probably those that maybe we see a 3-player class, which would be extremely nice to see. And you know, once next year comes along, we'll be talking about some players that we feel very strongly we would like to see in the Hall of Fame. We were talking about some of them like Joe Mauer and Chase Utley, who those are some guys who definitely are going to get a vote for me, at least on our mock ballots or fake ballots that have no value to the world. They'll be getting my votes.
Alex Carver, we had a big argument in the chat yesterday, or not maybe a big.
I would say discussion. Not argument.
A big discussion leading up to the election if Billy Wagner should be a Hall of Famer. You were talking about how his playoff stats, performances should not be looked at that much compared to his regular season performances. Just what are your overall thoughts on a reliever closer getting into the Hall of Fame? Because I know you and Eli have opposite viewpoints on this matter.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's when I hear people talk about it, and I saw this on TV the other day, I heard a writer talking about why he didn't vote for Billy Wagner, and it wasn't because of anything he did during the regular season, but because he wasn't good in the playoffs for like 11 innings. So you're discounting everything that he did during the other 890 innings of his career or whatever he threw, or I think he threw like over 900 innings, right? So, and then you're just going based off of 11.2 innings in the playoffs, which yes, the playoffs are important and how you pitch in the playoffs kind of defines you. I get it. I kind of get the argument, but I just can't get behind discounting what a player does more often than not because he was not good in 11.2 innings in the biggest spots of his career, which yes, that's important. And I understand it, but man, baseball's a team game. It's not all up to one guy. You know, in those moments, maybe it's all up to one guy because you're the guy with the ball. I get it. I understand the thinking behind it. I just can't really get behind that thinking. That guy was amazing and one of the most dominant closers in baseball for a very, very long time. But yeah, if you just go based off of playoff performance and that is your tipping point, I don't support that. But that was my argument for you guys. If you're of the opposite opinion, like that one writer was, then that's your prerogative. But I don't agree with that.
You want a stat? By the end of this upcoming season, when we're back here a year from now, Sandy Alcantara will have more career innings pitched than Billy Wagner. That's how insignificant even the best relievers, consistent relievers are in the grand scheme of things, accumulating workload compared to even young starting pitchers. So to me, it just comes down to as simple as that.
So where do you stack him up against Trevor Hoffman, who's in the Hall of Fame?
Well, this is a tough spot where I would probably not have voted for Trevor Hoffman either. These guys
crazy. That's crazy.
the best. Other people feel
Eli's
differently,
hot
and that's why nobody has to be unanimous.
I want to
Honestly,
see Eli. I
the
want to
one
see
player that
Eli.
was unanimous was Mariano Rivera, but it doesn't have to be unanimous. And I know that a lot of people do feel differently. That relievers are, I mean, they're obviously indispensable to the game today. It's just that they're less significant than any other position. But
Yeah, but no
I
one
want to
should
see
be
Eli on
punished.
an
Why
episode of What a Relief. Eli, I want you to go on an episode of What a Relief with Noah and talk about this. No, I'm just.
But why should that player be punished for the position he plays, like a kicker in the NFL? Why?
I mean, they're not being punished. They're not being punished. They're being paid a lot of money to pitch for a lot of years, and they're remembered very fondly by the teams that they pitch for. Yeah, and there are certain moments of theirs that can be immortalized in the Hall of Fame, but in terms of actually getting plaques for themselves as being in this very select fraternity of most important big league players of all time, that's just where I draw a line. But then again, I'm not in the BBWA yet, so
Yes.
There we go. Fist
Yeah.
Rights vote. I kind of think of it as you're one of the very best in that position. Again, Isaac mentioned quarterback. You can't compare Peyton Manning to someone like Adam Vinatieri, but they're both greatest of all times at their position. Someone like Devin Hester, who will get in as the best kick returner or whatever in the Hall of Fame when he comes. But talking about baseball Hall of Fame, the last player I really wanted to mention for this is Gary Sheffield, receiving 55% of the vote. He is coming up to his 10th and final year on the ballot. He needs 20% to get into Cooperstown. Alex K., give me your thoughts on Gary Sheffield going into the Hall, and do you think he can overcome that large deficit to make it on his final year on the ballot?
I originally would have said no, just because I feel like usually if you're on the ballot for going on 10 years now, why would you get in now if the writers didn't think you should get in before? Scott Rowland kind of changed my mind on that, whether that's a rational thought or not. Seeing him get such a low vote total in his first year and then turning around and getting into the Hall of Fame later on kind of gave me a little bit more confidence in it. Ultimately, if I had a vote, I would vote Gary Sheffield. I think he was one of the best in the game during his era, which is what my criteria is and what I feel everyone's criteria should be is, were you one of the best during your era? And personally, I think he was.
That's the problem. There's just no set criteria for any of these players. There's so many reasons people on this ballot that you have reasons not to vote for them, whether it's their character, whether it's a PED thing, whether it's being on the Astros in 2017, whether it's, there's a lot of reasons to not vote for guys, and there's no set criteria. I think that's part of the problem.
Before I go on to the next topic, can I see a show of hands? Do you think Gary Sheffield makes the Hall next season?
I think it's going to be hard. I would like another thing I want to mention before you move on from Hall talk, though, Danny. I mentioned Rowland being on the Reds later in his career, looking up to him when he was on the Cardinals before. Fred McGriff was on the Padres when I was growing up at San Diego and playing in those Little League games. So it's cool camaraderie to see two guys that I really looked up to and watched basically every day make it. But what I will say for Sheffield is, man, he's trending. I put this on Twitter a little while ago. He's trending like in the same kind of direction that Walker was, in his like 7th, 8th, and 9th years on the ballot leading up to his last year of eligibility. But there's character stuff that a lot of these old-time writers are not going to get behind. He's mentioned in the Mitchell Report. He had the thing where he threw like a baseball at a fan or whatever it was. Like, there's just like PR stuff that he had that was not great for him. But man, I think he has to be there. The guy has over 500 career home runs, over I think a 900 career OPS. The guy deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for sure. He should be there, and he trends so well and was trending like I think over 70% before today. And then, of course, all of these last-minute ballots from the old-time writers come in, and he doesn't make it. So those are the guys he has to win over. Can he do it? It's going to be tough, but I hope he does because I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, definitely.
I'm with you, Mr. Alex.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and talk about another big news that came out on the Marlins, I believe, yesterday, and that is a potential sale of the Marlins, as reported in the LA Times, that they could go up for sale very soon. Bruce Sherman did have a comment back saying that it's not going to happen anytime, that he's focused on the Marlins. Kevin, are the Marlins going to sell?
I really don't even know how to respond to that, because you would. I mean, if Sherman were to sell the team, that would be a pretty good time. Angels are no longer for sale. Looks like the Nats are no longer for sale. So I think it would be a good time to sell with the amount of players. But I mean, just the way he talks about it, and I know some may think this is a smokescreen type of a statement from Bruce Sherman. But I mean, he doesn't look like he wants to sell, and in his lifetime. So I mean, this guy's pretty content on staying in Miami, but he hasn't really achieved much on the field with the team. So maybe this year is different, but I really don't know if this guy's going to sell the team or not. I know Eli would have or Isaac would be more fit to answer if he will sell the team.
I think this exact timing would be very unusual and wouldn't really serve his interests for owning these franchises. There's generally been a trend where the value ticks up and up and up and up. And really the only exception was the past few years due to COVID. COVID took a pretty big hit on things and limited revenue, at least for that year of 2020. But now things are again trending in a very positive direction. By Forbes' estimation, this past year in 2022, Major League Baseball made more money than ever before. Revenues neared, I think, $11 billion for the sport as a whole. Every team gets a piece of that. That's called revenue sharing. The Marlins are included, and their franchise value benefits accordingly. Sherman, under his reign, he has secured, some very important revenue streams by getting a more favorable local television deal, by getting naming rights on the ballpark. There's additional revenue coming in from different places. The expanded postseason benefits everybody as well. In the near future, I think it will reach a point where the franchise value is higher than it was back in 2017. And there would be an escape route for him to make a profit and go into retire away in a position that receives less scrutiny than he does currently as the what are we calling him? The control person of the team, the primary owner. So I don't think this exact timing seems pretty likely. It just should be noted, the reason why it was brought up is this came in an article from the LA Times about the Angels situation. Everybody assumed the Angels were going to be sold, and Artie Moreno just backed out of it. He decided, even though he got bidders to reach his asking price, he changed his mind, at least for the short term. The Washington Nationals were seen likely to be sold, and they had somewhat of a change of heart where they're going to bring on some minority partners, but the Lerner family that controls them is not imminently going to be selling controlling interests of the team. So the only reason why this passed the smell test to me, despite his denial, is the fact that if there are very few or no other teams on the market at that one time, then that allows the Marlins or any other team to take advantage of that, entice a bidding war. The most important thing, the reason why these franchises get so much money in the first place is because there's only 30 of them total for now. There will be 32 probably in the very near future, but only 30 of them and only a select few that are available at one time. So very wealthy people are willing to, at least initially, overpay in order to have this very difficult to obtain item, to be in this very select fraternity. And that has a lot of appeal to people.
And that's why I started with the time is kind of right to sell, because this would be the only team on the market. There would be a huge bidding war. I don't know how the bidding war was last time when they sold, but I know Jorge Mas was involved and some other bidders there. So maybe it would be a good time to sell the Marlins if this report that came out yesterday ends up being true, and Bruce Sherman decides that now's the time to sell the Miami Marlins to a new owner.
Yeah, and for those of you who may be wondering the value for the Marlins, they are dead last in Major League Baseball. The only team not in $1 billion, $99 million.
Yeah, but you got to take that number with a grain of salt. You know what a team is worth is what someone's going to pay for it. So I think those numbers are
obviously someone's going to
relevant.
overpay.
Right. Those numbers are extremely relevant until they are actually for sale, and they will get bids that are greater than that number for sure.
What I do want to say is that whenever we talk about ownership of the team and the unfortunate history that a lot of it has nothing to do with Sherman, about the history of this team being poorly run by previous owners, there's this fantasy about somebody, a true Miamian through and through, to be the one that steps up and makes the bid. Someone who understands this market and who maybe was a Marlins fan for a while. Somebody that that really has their finger on the pulse about what it takes for this team to thrive in Miami. The prices that we're talking about, there's just such a small group of people that can actually afford to buy this. And it's not going to be sent directly to somebody. There's going to be no priority given to people that are from South Florida. It is going to go to whoever pays the most money and whoever Major League Baseball feels has the most secure financial backing. And that's going to be it. It's really, that's not part of the process. And I don't think that's necessarily the fix to this franchise's situation. It's not putting in the hands of somebody from Miami is not going to magically solve everything. It's simply about putting in the hands of somebody that's willing to make the baseline investment to put this franchise on sturdy ground and to most obviously put money into the major league payroll, but also build out the front office and also just come up with best practices that are repeatable and sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. There's still time for Sherman to salvage things. This is obviously an extremely critical year in his tenure, 2023. Going into this year, spending more money on payroll than ever before, expectations for the major league product higher than ever before. And I think at that time, depending on how this year goes, maybe you see some sort of reevaluation about whether he wants to stay. At this particular time, I see no hurry on his part. He probably wants to see at least one more year play out before even putting it in his mind.
And not only do you spend the money, but you not hollow out the minor league system, but you get rid of a little bit from the minor league system. So I would say it's like a mini, not as drastic as what they spent in 2012, but close, right? In terms of like where that ownership was to where he is right now. So they definitely want to win right now. It took them a while to do it. They waited till a little bit late in the offseason to make most of their signings, but you make a trade that pretty much hollows out a bit of your minor league system in terms of offense. You get rid of your best offensive prospect and then another projectable one like I've talked about. So yeah, I mean, it's clear that they want to win right now. It's clear that this is, like you said, the most they've spent in an offseason since he's been here. So I definitely agree. I think this is a critical offseason for him, or a critical season for him coming up. And we'll see what they do. So yeah, I mean, he says not in his lifetime.
That makes no sense.
To me.
Yeah, that's right.
That defeats the purpose of owning a team. Is you don't even get to reap in the profit of, so whoever wrote that statement for him, because I know as sure as hell it wasn't him who wrote it, they did a good job.
Another good job that we can go to our next topic is the Marlins made a trade. We have yet to talk about this on stream. We have talked about this on Spaces, Twitter, everything. The Luis Arias, Pablo Lopez trade. We have yet to discuss this on stream. The trade that everyone has been waiting for has happened. As you see all the details on the screen, Marlins traded Pablo Lopez, number 5 prospect Jose Salas, and Byron Churio for Luis Arias. Excuse me. Alex Carver, we will get to you and talk about the prospect aspect. Isaac, talk to me about this trade. What do you like? What don't you like? Giving out Pablo to get one of the best contact hitters in baseball.
Yeah, let's tackle this thing, shall we? First things first, I think it's fair to say Miami was in a situation where they had to overpay. Let's get that out of the way. They definitely did give up a good amount of talent in this trade. But in return, they're getting something that they needed desperately, and they're getting one of the best pure hitters in all of Major League Baseball, someone that walks more than he strikes out. And to be frank, they don't have anyone like that in the system. There's guys like Joey Wendell, and there's guys who are good, okay, pure hitters, but they don't have anyone like Arias. So this is going to be a huge, huge addition to the lineup every single day. I see him leading off. He doesn't walk a ton, but he does not strike out. So he's a really fun player, and I think he's going to be perfect to lead off in Miami. But in return, you gave away 2 years of Pablo Lopez and the entire career of Jose Salas and Byron Churio. So it did hurt, but I think it was a win-win situation for both teams. And Miami needed this player. I think it was really important. And, the critics are saying they gave up too much. They overpaid. I give it a B-. this trade on Miami's side. But like I said, it was a lot, but I think they really needed this player more than they needed Jose Salas and Byron Chourio. So it was a good trade in my opinion.
Carver, talk to me. Salas, Chourio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mostly agree with Isaac. I gave it the trade a C. I think it's the Marlins got their guy. This is the guy that they really targeted and the guy that they really wanted. It's a guy that does exactly what they're trying to do with the offense, as we talked about before on the stream. I think we talked about Arias last time we were on here. We were saying how much he fits, and I think he does fit exactly what the Marlins are going to do or want to do on the offensive side of the ball. What I don't like from what we've heard about this is that he'll be shifting back to second base. I think he's a replacement level defender. I think they probably should have just sufficed to say that he should have been either a DH or a first baseman, but whatever. They're going to put him at second base. It is the position that he knows the best. It's where he spent most of his time. Hopefully he's at least a 0 defensive run saved this coming season at second base while hitting for a good average and getting on base a lot. So that's what I'll say for him. To give up Pablo and the best offensive prospect, I think, until a couple of days ago in your system, Jose Salas. I really like that guy. He is really, really good at impacting the baseball because of his bat speed and hands. Great. Comes from that great family. You see Ethan, his brother, that just went for ridiculous amounts of the Padres, and then he has another brother, Andrew, who's coming out, I think, next year in 2024 in the international class, and they say that he should be even better. So he has a great pedigree from a great family. I really like that player. I know some prospect analysts don't like him. They say that he's like thicker in his lower half. I disagree with that personally. I think that player is good. So I don't like losing him. And then Chourio, man, that guy, like I've told you guys, I mean, it's a limited sample, but he was third, and I still will go back to this, third in the Marlins organization in WRC plus in his first season as a 17-year-old. So you give up a lot. You give up a right now. You give up a very soon in Salas, and you give up a future piece in Chourio to improve right now immediately on your major league team offensively. So it's a need for a need. It's a need for multiple needs for the Twins, I would say. Definitely think the Twins won the trade, but the Marlins got their guy. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and what hurts a little bit more is the defense part of it, that they have like 4 second basemen that are going to be in their everyday lineup. None of them playing second base, ironically. And then the other part is I'm fine with it at the same time because, like I think I told you guys in the chat earlier, all these guys, all these high-rated guys that Miami has called up, offensive players, none of them have hit. Not one of them. The exception maybe being Nick Fortes. So why would Salas be any different? He's not going to come up and be a mate, so you take that risk for maybe for sure. You do that any day of the week. It was the quantity that maybe hurt a little bit, but I like that trade.
Yeah. Alex K, I want to hear your opinion on this trade. Do you think the Marlins could have gotten a little more for that trade? Do you think they could have gotten a little more instead of just Arias? Do you think they could have gotten someone else?
I think maybe they could have gotten a little bit more, but not by much. I think that teams might have been a little bit apprehensive about Pablo Lopez's injury history and how deep he usually gets into seasons. So whether or not they could have gotten more doesn't really bother me too much, even though it bothered other people a little bit. I love this trade. I came on the stream a few weeks ago and said that the Marlins should shift away from what everyone else is doing in terms of getting home run heavy guys, power heavy guys. This guy is perfect for Marlins Park. I wish he was a little bit faster, but besides that, he hits the ball all over. He's a line drive hitter. He gets on base, doesn't strike out, walks a lot. So I'm excited to see not just him play for the Marlins, but also to play in Lone Depot Park for 81 games. One of the things that does concern me a little bit, and I don't know if I'm just overreacting a little bit, giving up Pablo Lopez now means I don't really think that the Marlins have a surplus of pitching anymore. Remember before we were always talking about, well, we have so many pitchers to choose from. There's so many pitchers that we can trade. It would suck if we traded them, but we could afford to. Now I can't look at anyone in the organization that I'd feel comfortable trading away to get another bat. So now I don't know where that new bat would come from. That's the only thing I'm a little bit worried about.
Yeah, I think what this says is that they're done adding bats for the time being. And Kim Ng, when she said it'd be tougher to trade a starting pitcher in the minors and majors, I think that shows that. And I agree with you, Alex, and I agree with Kim that, okay, you traded Pablo. That's it. I could have seen them going in with Pablo and Cueto and those eight starting pitchers, and not even have enough. So they definitely should be careful, not trade anymore, because you don't want to make a strength of weakness, all that good stuff. So it's a little bit of a sketchy, because if Trevor struggles, Luzardo gets hurt, Edward can't throw strikes, you're really in a shitty situation. So
I guess
you talk about it like we all think that the Marlins have like this extended supply of pitching, but they really don't. I mean, they have a couple of guys that, we really like: Eater, Fulton, Meyer, sure, but there's question marks around some of those guys. And then now you're looking at the big league team. They're signing Johnny Cueto to basically fill a spot. I mean, hopefully he can do well, but they're basically signing him to fill a spot because those guys are not ready yet. So if you trade another pitcher, you're in trouble. I think you do make a strength more of a weakness, right? So I definitely agree with both of you guys that this is likely is what I would say in terms of them trading from their biggest strength. With this, I think their biggest strength is still pitching, but still, I don't think they can do any more without making it like much more of a weakness for the future. So I think they're probably done trading from pitching.
I guess the only other thing we'd say is, it really does suck to lose Pablo. Not obviously the Pablo the pitcher, but Pablo the person. What a guy. I mean, you think about Pablo always with a smile on his face, no matter the situation. Always, if you ask for an autograph, he will give you the autograph. He will take a picture. And you guys know Pablo was amazing to all of us. Great with the media. Whenever you asked him a question, he gave you an amazing answer, just go into detail. So it really does suck, but I guess I got the impression that the Marlins traded Pablo for Pablo Lopez, the position player, just the attitude that Arise brought in that press conference, mainly in Spanish. I know English, it's a little harder for him, but he answered to the best of his abilities and kind of reminded me of Pablo Lopez, just how excited he is to be a Marlin. And I am very, very excited to see what this guy brings to the table. And it's on the screen. No one mentioned he was the American League batting champ. So also an all-star. And I believe he won another award. Silver Slugger, was it?
Yeah. Silver Slugger, I think at first base. So this is covered on a podcast episode that I'm putting out, but at the end of tonight, probably tomorrow morning, I recorded with Ted Swetzler of Twins Daily. And he echoed the same thing that Kevin brought up about how he was a fan favorite for both what he did on and off the field. He was somebody that
he's going to be
forms
fun.
Easy relationships with all sorts of people and makes your clubhouse vibe better. And that's something that matters for a team that, even despite Pablo's presence last year, the vibes around the Marlins were awful last season. Yeah, all sorts of just unnecessary tension and leading to a team that I think we all agree just underperformed what the talent they had last year. And you hope that's not the case this upcoming year. So that in itself is very important. I think overall, the longer I get away from the trade, the more I'm okay with it, because I was pretty cynical in the moment about how much they overpaid and how it limits what they can do moving forward. Arise just checks a lot of boxes for them. And one of the biggest questions is the defense and the durability, because dating back to his minor league career, he's had knee issues, and those resurfaced as recently as this past year. So that was believed to be a factor in why he played a lot of first base and DH this past year, because of the Twins' concerns about his workload and his athleticism. He's only 25 years old, but he is an old 25, as we say. We like to talk about young, whatever it is, about players that are aging very gracefully, and he's kind of the opposite of that physically. So hopefully, he mentioned to us on, I think he mentioned that he lost weight this offseason with how he's training. So hopefully that pays off in some way or another. I've reached a point where if he is fully available and if he plays 140 games a year the next 3 years, I think he's going to be a lot more productive than Pablo is going to be with Minnesota. And I think overall the prospect price, he'll be able to overcome that as well. It's so important that he just stays healthy and continues doing what he has been doing. So like everybody else, just very intrigued to see the way that it plays out.
Yeah, and this would probably right now, you bring in Arise, he's probably your best hitter on the Marlins. So you have to feel really, really, really good about what you're getting in Luis Arise here. And it does suck that he's not playing first. I kind of disagree with the move to put him at second, but I mean, at the same time, I am very excited to see Jazz Chisholm play some center field. And we saw the article on Ken Rosenthal and how all of that went down. So we'll talk about that.
That's next.
Yeah.
Well, since Kevin brought it up, that was the next topic I wanted to mention. We have a rise at second. Isaac mentioned the surplus of second basemen playing out of position, and one of them is Mr. Jazz Chisholm Jr., who is now the starter for your Miami Marlins. No Brian Reynolds, no one not like that. That trade not going to happen now. Marlins are sought after having Jazz Chisholm at center field. Is, I believe, coming out of the WBC to be able to play and learn that position in spring training. So sadly, you're not going to be able to see Jazz with Great Britain for the WBC. So whoever wants to start it off, this is probably going to be one of our biggest topics tonight. Jazz Chisholm being the new center fielder.
Well, what's ironic to me is that Jazz might end up being a better defensive center fielder than Brian Reynolds. I think that's,
Yeah.
that's probably going to end up being true. But yeah, it's a scary decision to make, especially with who you're replacing him with at second base, because Jazz is someone that rated very well defensively. Obviously, he had some mishaps, a lot of them, but he was someone that was a good defensive second baseman, and you're replacing him with someone who's not the best. But what really makes me happy, and it makes me more comfortable about the situation, that's Jazz's idea. He's very happy. He's very excited about doing this. His favorite player is Ken Griffey Jr. And so this isn't exactly like Hanley Ramirez going from short to third. There's a whole bunch of issues with that. This is a player that's very excited to move from the infield to center field. So that's got to, at least make Skip very relieved. And yeah, that's about it. It's going to be very fun spring training to watch Jazz Chisholm shagging fly balls in center, because I think he can do it. The arm might be a bit of an issue in my opinion. I don't think he's got the strongest arm, but he should be able to cover a lot of ground more than any other outfielder in the Marlins system for now.
And the coaching he's going to have. I mean, John Jay,
former
MLB center fielder Juan Pierre, who we saw in the article may take a role into helping Jazz make the transition. And I believe there was one other player, Preston Wilson. Preston Wilson told him to DM him to teach him center field out there. So that Jazz has more than enough help in coaching. So just to make this the smoothest transition possible. So I'm very excited to see how this turns out. I mean, if it doesn't work out, you just move him back to second, or you just make him play through it. But hopefully this is a transition that works out, and he has the athleticism and speed to make this work out. And he was smiling, supposedly shagging fly balls and running everywhere. So he's excited.
The only thing missing at the moment, we'll get to Alex Krutchik in just a second, is the lack of like a really bona fide defensive center fielder fallback plan to either consider for the opening day roster or call up soon after, as we'll get to with the spring training non-roster invitees, even the ones that they're bringing along, Jake Mangum and Brian Miller, Garrett Hampson. If things don't go so well for Jazz in center field, but he stays healthy and they want to move him around somewhere else, I was expecting some sort of investment in a veteran center fielder at some level that you can really trust there defensively when situations call for it. And at this moment, even things have to go really well for Jazz there on both sides of the ball in order to feel like this roster itself makes sense. For the moment, I still feel like he could, unless he totally solves this big void they've had, I still feel like they're leaving themselves very thin at the center field position.
I was just going to mention before, I forget right now who had the question about his arm strength. For whatever it's worth, according to Baseball Savant, he's in the 23rd percentile for arm strength, which isn't great. Hopefully his athleticism makes up for that, though.
The thing that you guys haven't mentioned, and I'm kind of with Isaac in the regard that he mentioned, I think he's athletic enough to do it. Of course, it's Jazz Chisholm, and if you know Jazz Chisholm, as we all do, people that are on here and people that are not, you know that he's not going to back down from a challenge. You know that he's going to want to challenge himself and prove himself, right? Which is, I think this is exactly what you saw in the Rosenthal article and everything like that. It's just who he is, right? So he'll take whatever challenge. If you told him to go play catcher, he'd probably do it, right? So, I mean, this is a guy that was injured most of the year last year. He played 60 games. And the reason why he was injured is because of his back and his knee. So now you're putting him in a cavernous center field in Lone Depot Park, and you're really hoping that your franchise player is going to be able to stay healthy, a guy that you may look to extend here in the near future. I think we all may see that on the horizon for Jazz. Can he stay healthy? Now you're putting him in the center field. It's risky. It really is. It really is a risky move by the Marlins to do this. And, You take him off of second base where he wasn't very good last year defensively, but seemed to be improving a little bit before he got hurt. And now you're telling him to go play a brand new position that he's never played before ever in his life, coming off of an injury season. So I don't know. I think it's a very risky move. Hopefully it works out. No, Jazz can do it, but can he stay healthy enough to do it? That's the main question.
Our buddy Juan Carlos here must have missed the beginning of the stream where Carver was talking about his third base career with the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, with Scott Rowland playing with Scott Rowland, a great American.
So let me grab just one more comment. This is also from Juan Carlos about why I think Jazz would be potentially worse defensively than Jesus Sanchez or DLC. I don't think necessarily worse, but there's still a big difference between those guys and being a positive defensive presence in center field. He certainly should be rangier than those guys and cover more grounds, but he also has a lesser arm than Sanchez and DLC. I think that gets overlooked a lot. That those guys are actually, they've standout arms, both the strength and the accuracy. Well, with DLC this past year, not as much as we saw the year before. But that's the thing, is that even with these other guys that they have internally, it's all these players that have the same defensive shortcomings that played out last year. In a couple of cases with Sanchez, with JJ Bleday, it seemed that the defensive pressures of playing center field also followed them when they came to the plate as well. And it's really hard to pin that down. But even with Jazz, I think maybe psychologically he is better prepared to overcome that. But it's a real thing when you're being asked to do something that you're not comfortable doing for half a game and try to still have the same level of enthusiasm and focus and confidence that you had before. Confidence is that key word that you always hear, and it's so hard to pinpoint how you gain confidence and how you lose confidence, but you absolutely know it when you see it. That was a big issue last year for this team, and with Jazz, you just hope that he has an unshakable degree of confidence. That's kind of what drew them to the Marlins in the first place. It's a fascinating experiment, and it's one just brought out of necessity. There's so few available center fielders right now. I mean, some would say there are no great available center fielders right now because the Pirates simply refuse to have deep talks about Brian Reynolds' trade. And this team has been searching, and they just have not found the appropriate value in a deal, and it's led them to this very interesting experiment.
I mean, the last thing I'll say on this before you guys go on is the guy's always been confident. I mean, he got hurt in spring training last year, and he was confident that he could do it. And, he was maybe – I don't know this for a fact, but they put him in 60 games, and then it turns out his injury got worse. So now he's saying, oh, yeah, I can do center field, according to Rosenthal. He's suggesting doing center field. So, of course, he's supremely confident in himself, and that's a great trait to have. But where do you come in as an organization and kind of protect the player from himself, and say that, hey, know your limits. So that would be my worry of the approach that they are taking with Jazz Chisholm. Of course, I'm not there and I'm not part of the organization, so I can't tell you exactly what's going on. But that would be my worry, is that they're not protecting the player from himself. They're just judging his word, being like, yeah, he knows he can do it. We think he can do it. All right, he's going to go do it. So I don't know. It's kind of an ongoing theme, it seems to be, with Jazz Chisholm. So, I mean, hopefully it goes well for him and he can figure it out. But it's interesting. I agree with Eli. It's definitely an interesting route to go with this player.
Would you have guys made that Luis Arias trade, or maybe not make that trade but overpay a little bit and get Brian Reynolds and Jazz play second? Would you have done that? What would you rather have what they're doing now with Jazz in center field, but you have Arias, or you get Reynolds but Jazz plays second?
I was going to tell Mr. Eli that if he thought that this was an overpay, if they did that Brian Reynolds trade, boy, would he have been unhappy for that one as well. Yes, Brian Reynolds is a totally different player than Luis Arias, but man, that would have been an overpay as well. So to compare the two, I don't know. I probably would. It's a good question, Mr. Daniel. I don't know.
It's a really good question. Yeah.
I think I'd rather them stick with Arias for now, especially if Jazz can do it. Then I'd rather them stick with Arias. You're going to give up two of those major league starting pitchers. You're going to give up your best offensive prospect plus more. I think you're happier just getting Arias, who's is going to hit. Brian Reynolds is coming off a bad year. He can't play center field that well. I think you're happy with Arias.
Yep.
But Reynolds is probably the better player. It's not worth the price. It's a tough one.
Now let's go into our next topic that was announced today. 3 letters, NRI, non-roster invitees. I know Alex Carver has the biggest smile on his face, so I'm going to leave him laugh to talk about this. No, I'm kidding. And our non-roster invites 27 players going from Yuri Perez, Paul McIntosh, Brian Miller, Isaac's favorite player, Will Banfield, just a who's who, a name of names here. Alex Carver, the floor is yours.
I mean, obviously you love Brian Hoeing. That's the standout in this class. Is you got to talk about the ground ball specialist, Brian Hoeing, best. I mean, I'm excited for that kid. He's going to be good. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully he can bounce back. But no, I think Marlins made some good selections here. Really excited to see 6 of the guys that I have in my top 30 prospects list on this exact list. Yuri, going to be amazing. Of course, that's the standout that Mish tweeted earlier. Super cool to see that a 19-year-old kid is going to get a chance to pitch for a major league team. I mean, even if it's in spring training, I don't care. He turns 20 right after spring training starts, I think. Same day as Khalil Watson, I think, by the way. I think they have the same birthday. But anyways, I think it's pretty cool that you're going to see a 19-year-old kid that's this far advanced pitch in Major League Baseball. That's special. And maybe not far away from pitching in regular season games. Super cool. Paul McIntosh, one of the most underrated guys that we talk about. I mean, I don't know how this guy's not in top 30 lists. He should be. He's in mine. I just don't know why he's not in other ones. Jacob Berry, we talk about him all the time and the variance that there is on this player, but he is a first-round pick. So let's see what he can do. He's 21, so bring him in spring training, put him in a couple different positions, see where he sticks. Also excited for Nasim. Nasim, I think, is, like I told you guys before we started, the best defensive player in the system for sure. Excited to see how he does at shortstop. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun list, really, really fun list. Dax Fulton, I'm very high on Dax Fulton. I think Dax Fulton is better than people think that he is, especially, even in a system like this with so many good pitchers. I think Dax Fulton's top 3 for sure in terms of pitching. So yeah, I mean, I like this list. I'm excited for Banfield as well. Defense, of course, is great. He came on at the end of the year last year. Offensively, made it up to Pensacola, caught all of their playoff games. So I think it's deserved for him. Jake Mangum, I'm excited to see that kid as well. So I think this is a fun list. I think you're going to see some good stuff in those split squad games and maybe late in games or maybe, early on here in spring training to see these kids play. So I think these guys that got the chance deserved it.
Yuri Perez's birthday is one day before Khalil Watson. Just let it. I didn't know.
I was close. There you go.
Oh, you're so wrong. You look, Alex. God damn it.
Fish on the farm, who man?
Yeah, I got you.
Are there any names on here that maybe obviously aren't the top prospects that you're keeping an eye on? Maybe they could make some noise, sneak into the opening day roster. Are there any names you guys are really looking at?
You guys,
I think Troy Johnson's probably the obvious name there. LeBlanc, obviously, if he performs well, LeBlanc, yeah, and he performs there. I guess you have to look at all the relievers they signed: Chichi Gonzalez, Enrique Burgos.
I will step in and point out that this is on. I added this as an extra segment on the recent Fishology episode that went out yesterday. Zip's projection systems are very high on CJ Hinojosa.
No, my boy.
It was a utility infielder, pretty much split time evenly between second, short, and third the last couple of years at AAA. Put up very good offensive numbers in that time. Showing good, just really well-rounded offensive profile. 28 years old, and he hasn't played in the big leagues yet. But when the projection systems pick up on something and really think that he's better than just about anybody else on this list in terms of potential 2023 offensive impact, and he plays these several different spots where it could be easy to find a spot for him in the middle of the year when injuries pile up. It's just something to keep an eye on because of that. Aside from him, just one player that's missing that we expected to be missing. But when I talked about Jazz in center field and having some sort of backup plan and having a bona fide defensive center fielder around the team in some respects, this is the second straight spring that Victor Mesa is not involved in Major League camp. He's still in the organization. He's still around. Will be his 5th season in the organization. He was a spring training invitee in 2019, 2020, 2021. He looked pretty bad in each of those opportunities. And now, even though he's had AAA experience, he's as close to big league ready as most of these players are. It's just that at the same time, he's not big league ready because of the severe limitations with his bat. That just goes to show how little they believe in him as an overall contributor, because the defense is still pretty legit. He is probably as good defensively in center field as anybody in this organization right now. And unfortunately, that is outweighed by the weak bat that he provides.
Two other things for me to point out on this is that they invite 5 catchers, which is a
I was
lot.
about to say, yeah.
I mean, Will Banfield is going to
Yeah.
stick at catcher. Santiago Chavez is pretty defensively limited. He's a veteran guy. He's, probably just that guy's going to be like taxi squad or you're just like called up for a couple games. I think that's probably his ceiling. But man, you look at Austin, especially Paul McIntosh and Austin Allen. These two guys, I think you could see at other spots that are not catcher. Austin Allen can play first base. Paul McIntosh can play first base, left field, and in a very, very big pinch, he can play third base as well if you need him to. So I think you could see these guys play different positions in spring training, especially Allen and McIntosh. So I would pay attention to that. Are they going to give these guys looks at other positions? McIntosh played catcher all year for Pensacola. He did not play anywhere else, but it'll be interesting. I know he played in spring training. He played at different spots, I think just first base. But it'll be interesting to see like how often they try McIntosh and Allen out at other spots. Will be something to look at. And then for a long shot to make the roster, because you guys asked, I will give mine to Jeffrey Yan, who, as you guys see, the star next to his name was a minor league free agent, and the Marlins re-signed him, and now he is back with the Marlins. So that's what those stars mean for those like Bice, Yan, who else is on here? Will Stewart. So those guys were free agents, and they're now back with the Marlins. They re-signed with the Marlins. So I like Jeffrey Yan. Huge velo, really good breaking ball. It's a long shot. Yes, he has control problems, and he can get wild, but keep an eye on that kid. I think he could be good.
Yeah.
There's some guys that didn't even know we're in the
I
organization.
think Brian Miller has an outside shot at making the opening day roster more than anyone.
We're joined by one of Kevin's classmates in the chat today.
Aw. Kev, you have to play our
I don't know who
intro
you are.
next time.
Maybe.
So I want to talk about a little bit about the guy in the picture, Yuri Perez. How do you guys think he's going to fare against major league competition, major league bats this time around? You mentioned 19, almost 20 years old, and inching closer even to the major leagues, especially if everything goes well in spring training. How do you think he's going to fare against top tier competition?
I think he's got a pretty high floor with him, just on the height and stuff he's got. I don't think any major league players are that used to seeing someone like him. So I'm very excited to see him firsthand. I don't think I've been able to see him live before, maybe on the backfields. I have seen him on the backfields last year, actually. But I'm very excited to see major league hitting. I think it's going to be a good test for him and nothing that he's not ready for. So he'll go to AAA to start the season, and we could see him in June, July, maybe a
Yuri,
maximum
right?
time frame.
You talking about Yuri?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
I'm
you
talking about I'm talking about Yuri.
Chichi
Okay, Daniel,
Gonzalez.
cut out for me. Yuri has a good chance of just dominating spring training. He's gonna get a lot of looks. I mean, with no Sandy, no Luzardo, and a couple other of these pitchers
No
gone.
Pablo.
Yeah, no, I was about to say him until I remembered. So, and then no
Yeah,
Johnny
very
Cueto, no Edward Cabrera. There's a couple guys. So, you're definitely gonna see a lot of Yuri Perez, Dax Fulton action. And that's going to be, and I'm very excited to see Dax Fulton up against this major league talent. If you saw the ending to his minor league season in 2022, you may think Dax Fulton will not last too much longer in double A. I mean, I really see him starting AAA pretty soon. Just the 13 strikeout game, how dominant he was. You saw maybe a different Dax Fulton from what we saw in High A Beloit, where the FIP was a big help for him, but then the ERA was a little high. And now you kind of see the opposite, but the FIP obviously still good for Dax. So we'll see. I'm very excited to see Dax. I'm very high on him as well, as Alex could say. I'm working on my top 30 list, and I'll tell you right now, Dax is number 2. So I'm very excited to see Dax win. There are a couple other guys here, obviously, we're going to keep a close eye out on.
That's a good question from LMF, by the way. Castano, I think tomorrow is his last day in DFA limbo. But just to, by the way, I posted a highlight earlier on him. This is off topic, but I want to mention it because it came up. He's up to 94, and he still needs a team, so hopefully he sticks around. But anyways, to talk about Perez, man, I mean, the more people you talk to and the more people that we all talk to, people that see him daily, like I talked to Eric from Pensacola who saw him like pretty regularly last year. They all say, man, I've never seen a pitcher like this. And there's reasons why. I mean, the guy had already had 3 pitches, and now he's adding in a slider. That's insane. Really good at control. Repeatability is insane. Just the fact that he's as mature and polished as he is at 19 going on 20 is just ridiculous. So, yeah, I agree with all of you guys that this guy is not far away. And that's a treasure in this Marlins system. And I'm glad that they treated him as such this offseason. That's one thing I'm glad that they definitely did this offseason, is make this man untouchable, because he's very good and he will be good as long as his health permeates. And Dax Fulton, I agree with you, Kevin. Like I said, top 3 pitchers in the organization. So I'm really excited to see both of those guys throw. I think they will both throw and are not just there for the experience. I think they'll both get time actually on the mound against big talent, which I think is cool.
And I guess the final player to quickly mention here before, Jake Eater's not on here because I believe he's going to be on an innings limit, or he will have some type of innings limit just due to his injury. So
it makes
he'll
sense.
He'll be with the team. He's going to be in the backfields. You'll see some Jake Eater if you go down to Jupiter, and he'll probably pitch some. So.
Yeah, McCambly too, another guy that's coming off injury. So, those guys are coming off injury. It's, they could be okay, but hopefully they'll be okay on the backfields. But it makes sense that they didn't get invited because of what they're coming off of.
I don't know if you guys listened to the Levitard show at all. Going back to Yuri, like a month ago, they were interviewing Sandy Alcantara a couple days after he won the Cy Young, and they asked him, around the majors, who's a guy that you think like, oh, this guy has just as good stuff as I do, and they meant like at the major league level, Clayton Kershaw, Garrett Cole. He said Yuri Perez and Edward Cabrera are going to be just as good as me, if not better.
And they had no clue who they were. I can imagine.
Oh, I guarantee you. They were like, oh, they must play for like the Mariners or something.
That's funny.
To go from this, we have we get to go over the next topic and go into Isaac going viral, going insane on Twitter, over 6 million views on his tweet, 6.2 to be exact, on Brian Anderson's comment. Let me say this for everyone. I'll read it. I'm just excited to be with an organization whose focus is really on winning and competing at every level. I think that's something I'm looking forward to. Isaac, you heard the comments. You wrote the comments. You're viral. Tell me a little bit about this situation, BA, because you're BA's number 1 supporter.
Yeah, BA. I remember listening to it live, and he started that statement with, I'm just excited to be with an organization. And he paused, and I was like, oh boy, what's he going to say? And he said that, and obviously a lot of Marlins fans didn't take it that well. I do think reading it from a tweet sounds worse than if you heard it live. I don't think he meant as much disrespect as it may have conveyed on my tweet and as on any report. But yeah, there's definitely some savagery in there for sure. And yeah, I guess he's just excited to be with a team that is in contention to be the best team in their division. Brian Anderson has been here since September of 2017. That team was okay, but then, you're endured the rebuild of 2018, 2019. He was a big part of the 2020 season, probably the best player on that team. But then right after that, another 90-loss season. So he hasn't really, and last year, again, another 90-loss season. So he just really hasn't been part of a solid full season team. So, you can't really blame him for making comments like those. You'd think that you could join a team and say that you're excited without bashing your old one. But unfortunately, that was not the case with BA. I still love him. I think he's going to be one of the better hitters on Milwaukee for sure. He's got Yelich there, and yeah, he's a great player, and I wish him the best.
Yeah.
What do you guys feel, especially if that comment says winning and competing at every level? That's the one that really, kind of makes you think. Where do you think maybe BA was going there when he meant every level?
Perhaps that he meant they don't really.
That's a good question. Yeah, you would have to ask him what he meant.
I think it's that maybe that the team is blatant with how they treat certain players, and maybe some affiliates they treat them differently than others. I think they do that, but I don't know if that's exactly what he meant. I'm not that close with him. But yeah, that's a good question, Daniel. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe he meant every year instead of level. Who knows? But it was an interesting quote nonetheless that I felt the need to type out. And obviously the Twitter world ate it up.
Exploded.
Yeah.
Isaac's now Mr. Hollywood.
Yeah.
One last topic to bring up really quickly. The Marlins backing off of Yuli Gurriel to play first base. Kevin, you're always on this. What do you think now, the situation at first base where it looks like Yuli Gurriel is most likely not going to be a Marlin?
I mean, it kind of sucks. I really don't know what to tell you. I really didn't mind if he didn't sign. You have Troy Johnston in the org, so he would be up pretty quickly. Kim mentioned it when you asked. She mentioned Luis Ariz could play at first base. So I mean, yeah, it sucks. You're losing a guy who's kind of a proven hitter at this league, and maybe you remove 2022 and 2021. He was the AL batting champ. So if Miami were to sign him, you would have had the American League batting champ of the past 2 seasons. He lives in Miami. I could tell you he preferred to want to be in Miami. So it sucks that he's not going to come and not going to finish off his career here with the team that where he lives. He lives in Miami, so it's okay. Not the biggest deal that he's not signing. You don't know what, maybe he wanted a lot more money than Miami is willing to offer. Who knows? I'm not sure. But it's nothing crazy. You still have Troy Johnson. And if PMAC turns out to be a pretty okay first baseman, that's another guy you could count on at some point.
So who do you guys think is going to be platooning a bit with Gary Cooper at first?
Probably Arise when Coop has an off day. And yeah, and as you mentioned, they have a lot of second basemen, so that won't be an issue to replace that position when Coop has a day off, or hopefully not, but is injured.
Yeah, let me just check to see if there's any. Yeah, really, the only other first base alternatives still out there are Miguel Sano and Luke Voigt, who just aren't as that stylistically. That's not what the Marlins want, and obviously the platoon doesn't match up the same way. We were talking earlier in the offseason about Gerard Encarnacion as someone who could squeeze on the roster just because he's had recent first base experience, but he's not a good first base defender. I mean, that's something that he would have to really go off in spring training to force his way onto the roster and make that work. But aside from that, I agree with Kevin that I think Arise is going, if they don't end up bringing in Gurriel, I think Arise is going to be playing more first base than Kim Eng suggested so far.
So something to call out on Gerard Encarnacion. I mean, if you look at Instagram and you look at what he's posting, he's spending a ton of time at first base in the offseason, working out at first base. So I agree with Kevin, though. Like, you could just mix and match. Cooper has a day off, just move Arias over and then put one of your multiple second basemen at second base as a filler, right? So, there's ways to go with that without having to sign a 39-year-old player with Yuli Gurriel, who, he could bounce back, but maybe he won't. I think he's at the end of his career. So, I mean, maybe the money just wasn't right for the Marlins. I don't blame them for not overpaying. If that was the case, I don't know that for sure. But and no, Lewin Diaz is with the Orioles, so no, he can't. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like, there's you can manage at first base without having to sign Yuli Gurriel, but don't count out your R. I think he could contribute at some point this year, either at first or in the outfield. That very good outfield arm, by the way, and I think he could suffice at first base.
Yeah. So,
and the last thing I wanted to mention with Gerard is although he didn't play first base in the majors, he has played this past offseason with the Dominican Winter League. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he finished second in Rookie of the Year there, I believe, and
Gerard, not because of his glove, because of his
not because of the glove, but because of the bat. But
he have like a 950 OPS or something like that, I think.
Yeah, during the regular season.
Don't forget that grand slam. Never forget that.
Don't forget that Joe Dunant also really forced.
Joe Dunant.
Yeah, that's true. So
where's he at?
With a grain of salt, but still, it's worth.
Is Dunant still in the Braves?
He's with the Braves, I believe. Yeah.
All right. So
I saw his father at the Heat game with Alex Rodriguez when I went. So anyway,
Alex Rodriguez, future owner of the Marlins.
They're brothers, A-Rod and Joe's dad.
Yeah.
So with Joe Dunant's dad, Alex Rodriguez, Yuri Perez, Dylan Bice, everyone. I think that's going to end it for this stream, covering 9 topics in at least an hour, a little over the hour. This has been a great show. For myself, Eli, Kevin, Isaac, Alex Carver, Alex K. Always go fish.
We got to end it off right. We got to